Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Christina. It's my honor to be here today representing TD Bank, and my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Allow me to start with Marquez Colson, who will be serving as the moderator for the discussion. Marquez Colson is an entrepreneur, strategic advisor, executive coach, and former New Orleans Saint star receiver and Super Bowl champion. Marquez's ability to create separation is the driving force behind his seemingly unattainable achievements personally and professionally. The mindset and methodology allowed him to create uniquely differentiated value that has fueled his journey as an unlikely NFL superstar and Super Bowl champion. Owner, partner, consultant, and strategic advisor to dozens of businesses and organizations ranging from startups to Fortune 100 companies. He's also a former teammate and friend of Malcolm Jenkins. As a result, the perfect person to lead today's conversation. Thank you for being here today, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, also joining us today is Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm is an entrepreneur, media personality, executive producer, writer, racial justice advocate, and philanthropist. He established himself as one of the NFL's all-time great defensive leaders, winning Super Bowls, championships in New Orleans and Philadelphia, as well as 3 Pro Bowl honors during his incredible 13-year NFL career. Malcolm was a first-round draft pick out of Ohio and a Jim Thorpe Award recipient. Fun fact, he's the only player in the NFL to have won a Super Bowl against Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Malcolm is a native New Jerseyan, growing up in Piscataway, New Jersey. Of course, given most of us in the room are Philadelphia Eagles fans, we all remember Malcolm's playing years with the Birds best from 2014 to 2019, and one of the integral players that helped bring the Vince Lombardi Trophy to Philadelphia for the first time in history during the Eagles' 2017 and 18 season. We're thrilled to have you both today. With that, please join me for a round of applause for Marquez Colson and Malcolm Jenkins.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right, perfect. So I really want to start with a thank you. Thank you to TD Bank. Thank you to Christina and the Chamber of Commerce of South New Jersey for putting this together. You know, for me, this is a special honor to be able to have this conversation with not just a colleague and former teammate, but really a brother that I have always had a lot of respect and admiration for. You know, somebody I consider a true leader and champion on and off the field. When you look at his illustrious NFL career, you know, 2-time Super Bowl champion, 3-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro. When you can put together that kind of first act and then follow it up with a second act like he has, man, it's just incredible to watch and you know, just kind of have close proximity to. You know, and his second act is unwavering commitment to social justice, community impact, and business success. You know, he's established a reputation in this second act as a leader with just incredible depth and influence. And, you know, just we all have the privilege this morning to kind of get inside the mindset and pick the brain of someone who's an extraordinary athlete, extraordinary business leader, and really to be able to do that through the lens of his memoir. I think we all have an incredible opportunity this morning. So I'm going to do my best to guide this conversation and make sure that we can all leave here with a few nuggets that we can apply to our own lives this morning. And it's all the same to you. Let's get rolling. Let's get it. Appreciate you all for being here. So Malcolm, to get started, so we're here to discuss your book. And you know, early in the book, you talk about how the first draft that you presented to the publishing company wasn't really received, you know, well. But you stayed committed to the vision. You worked, and I know how difficult it is to actually try to get something done outside of football in training camp.
Yeah.
But you stayed committed to the vision. Reworked it, resubmitted it, and the second time around, it was received really well. And that's the version of the book that we're talking about today. Um, so my question for you, starting out, is, why was this project so important to you at that time? And why did you feel that your story was a powerful thing that you needed to share with the world?
Yeah, so I think the book started to come to my mind. I had just left Philly, and I was upset about it. I wasn't happy about leaving Philly. I thought I'd finish my career there. But I ended up back in New Orleans. It was COVID, and like many people, I had a lot of time just to reflect. I'm sitting in the house by myself. Um, and for the first time, I really felt like the end of my career was closer than the beginning. I was clearly seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I was about 30, 31 years old, which is old in the NFL. Um, and so I knew this would probably be my last stint. And I really just started to think about all the things I had been through. Um, and there was so much about my story that I hadn't really considered. All of these things that I started to remember that happened to me that really defined and shaped who I was. And knowing that I have a ton of athletes, a ton of young people, a ton of peers who are looking at me as an example, I thought it would be only fair and remiss to really give them the true kind of background of my story. It's not just the success, but it's all that goes into it. It's the failures, the many failures that I had to endure, the many lessons I had to learn in order to stand up and be the person that I've seen today. And so I really wanted to tell that story. I have never written a book in my life, and so um, that project seemed a little doubtful, and I actually really doubted myself. And it's the whole book is about, even the first chapter is about overcoming fear and really like finding the strength within. There's like, even in the exercise of writing this book, I didn't think I could. And so it got rejected multiple times because I had gotten a ghostwriter to help me write it. I thought, you know, most people, if you do something great, you get a ghostwriter to write about it, almost like sitting like a portrait, right? It's like, just put this out there and it'll go. And it just didn't get a response. And so I had to really sit down and evaluate my own story for myself and think about, if I was telling this to a younger teammate of mine, what would I want them to know? And I can think about guys like you that I watched as a young player, as a rookie coming into the league. And after games, everybody sleep on the away games except for me. I'm watching, and he's over on his computer with spreadsheets and things like that. Everybody else is playing games or knocked out or playing cards on the flight. He's doing work, and I noticed that as a young player. Drew Brees is the world. So now, I want to leave that same example, but instead of it being something where it's like, I leave the city, I change the team, that information, that access is gone. If I put it in a book, that stuff is there forever. And what I had to learn was that those stories mean more when they're authentic. And so doubt for me was the thief of authenticity. And because I was doubting my ability to write my own story, I was trying to get somebody else to tell it. It just didn't quite hit right. And then when I finally took the ownership of my own story, figured out what I wanted to say, put it into a 50-page kind of overview, immediately I started getting more hits. And I still didn't learn my lesson, right? Because I was still playing football at the time. And even though they had acquired the 50 pages that I wrote, I still told myself, I don't think I can write this. So I hired another ghostwriter. About a year later, we're still trying at it, and now it's 30 days before the manuscript is due, and it wasn't ready. And so I had a decision to make. Do I put it out as is? It was like 600 pages long. Do I scrap the project, or do I rewrite it myself in 30 days? And if I didn't think I could do it before, you can only imagine what I felt there. But I think, what I learned over my career is that, again, doubt crushes authenticity. And so in 30 days, I just went into training camp mode, woke up early every day, and did what I did best and what I knew best. And that was a process of hard work and just putting my soul into something. And that's what this book ended up being, something that I wrote directly from myself. That came out of, I wrote it in real time. Like, I was retiring, dealing with all of these emotions and going through these processes myself and figuring out what I wanted to leave behind, and it was this memoir. So it's really something that I thought was important to kind of bookend my career, to put it in context for people who are fans of me, followers of me, supporters of me, to understand. One, to pay homage to those that really helped me become who I am, to highlight those moments and decisions that I made that I thought were important for others who might be going through similar situations, but also to show that when you talk about people who are successful, usually there are a lot of things on the back end that you don't see. Right? We watch Sunday afternoons and we see our favorite athletes do some amazing things. We don't watch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and all that goes in between that to get them there. And I think that is where the story lies.
I mean, there's so many things in what you just said, but to me, just in playing with you and just understanding, what goes into it, it's kind of that story is really the embodiment of something we always said as players. Like, you fall to the level of your preparation, and I think you kind of being in that time crunch and having to get it done and relying on those processes. Definitely turned out a finished product that I think we can all gain some real insights from, and just kind of thinking and talking about success. Just turning the page a little bit here. You're many athletes go their entire career and don't get an opportunity to win one championship. You were not just fortunate enough to win two, but you did them in drastically different kind of phases of your career. One, we won one together in your rookie year, and then I think in year 12 you won here in Philly. So, as kind of going and reaching the summit in those two different phases, like how did your outlook on success and the path to get to success change, the second time around?
Yeah. So for context, I came into the league in 2009, and we won a Super Bowl that my first year. So the bar got set really high, right? But I think what it allowed me to see is, what does it take to succeed at the highest level, on the highest stage, with the highest competition? And not only what is it like to succeed, but then what is the impact of that success? New Orleans is a very unique city because its relationship with its team, similar to that of Philly and its fan base, is very intimate. Right? Like, whatever happens on the field kind of gives the mood of the city. It's a city that never won a Super Bowl before, that had a bunch of hardship. And the Saints, when they win, is just that moment where the city can come together and have some relief. And so to be able to be on that team and watch the leaders navigate the ups and downs of a season, to deal with all of the doubt, we went from literally wearing paper bags over our head, calling ourselves the Aints, to being in a Super Bowl against Peyton Manning, as the underdog, and then to come out and win it the way we did and come back to the city of New Orleans. The impact was just amazing. Somewhere that was, just maybe a couple years before that, murder capital in the United States, suddenly had no crime for about a week. So, you really start to see that what we do on this field is not only just about the championships and what we can do for each other and money, but we actually have real impact on the city as a relationship there. So when I'm able to now come to Philly as a veteran and I'm looking, to kind of place my stamp on the team and the city, my favorite thing was planting the seeds of that vision to younger players. Like, the city, Philadelphia, has never won a championship. They've been close. Like, they love this team. You won't imagine the impact you'll have on this city when we can have a championship parade down Broad Street. I would just plant these seeds because I knew what the impact was. I knew what it took to get there. I knew that it took everything from leadership from the coaches to the players. It took you to be healthy. It took you to have a little bit of luck, and it took you to stay together. And I pulled on a ton of those lessons that 2017 season, almost literally to a T. So I think, and then the impact was exactly what we thought it would be. Being able to come back and still talk to people who, talk about their parents' dying wishes was to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl, and they got that wish. thank you, thank you. And I always say it's on the house. I worked really hard for that. It's like it's all good. But those relationships, it's unique. It's a unique pleasure to when the thing you do, the thing you love most, what you put your effort into, not only benefits you, but has an impact on other people in the community. That's a special thing. So I always cherish the ability to sit in that seat. And I think my first stint in New Orleans, seeing other leaders, seeing kind of how it all took place, really prepared me for this place. But then, but that standard is really the same everywhere else. So even once you started to see, like, okay, this is how you truly make an impact, I would say we took the same formula and applied it to the foundation. So literally, the foundation was started in 2010, maybe a few months after we won the Super Bowl, with my mom as the president. And impact was our ethos. She came to me one day like, "You do a lot in the community, but I think you need to focus here. We can either be, a shallow puddle that kind of touches a bunch of communities and does a lot of stuff, or you can be a well, that plants your feet into a community and really gives people life." And so we started that in New Orleans and immediately began to see kind of the impact of, like, when you invest time, patience into a community, into youth, they do some special things. And now we are 14 years later, still have an impact on everywhere that we've called home: Ohio, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, with that same kind of championship mentality. So it's once you've set the standard for the success and the impact you want to have, that's really kind of how we gauge everything.
And again, just as a friend and somebody, a colleague, the fact that you've always moved with an internal standard that was above and beyond anything that anyone could put on you. That's one thing that's always stood out to me about you. And it's evident in not just your play on the field, but it's evident in the work that you do in the business world, and also the work that you all do in the community. So when you had the ability to reach the summit 2 different times with some space in between, in between those 2 peaks are some valleys. And we shared a couple of those years together in New Orleans. That weren't the outcomes we were looking for. But in the book, you kind of talked about a coordinator that you had that, kind of put the scheme above the players. His take was, the scheme is always going to be right. The players need to buy into the scheme versus, hey, here's the scheme. Players, use what you have to maximize it. And getting to this person kind of midway through your career, you had already built some experience. You had already had a lot of success. So the question is like, how as someone who has established a presence, someone who has, created value, like, how do you balance, towing the line between really, leveraging your instincts and playing into your instincts, versus, in those times where you just have to be instinctual to make a play versus, trying to be rigid and stay within the system? How do you balance that as a leader?
Yeah, that was a tough thing for me. Like, okay, winning the championship, right? And now I know what it takes to win. And then you come somewhere and you realize that the culture here is not a winning culture. Some people I've seen, just lower their standard and they just kind of get by. Other people fight against it, but then they kind of create themselves as like an outcast, where you come in and you're the guy who won a championship, so everybody else, is doing a different level than you, and you kind of isolate yourself. So there's a line that you got to play where you know internally what it takes to win, but there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. So you try as much as possible to adapt to a new culture, to adjust yourself. But there were times where I also had to recognize that they brought me here for a reason, right? And me as a player, I'm prepared. I know I turned every single stone. I know I've looked at every single film. So if I'm in a game and I know something because I'm prepared for it, it's my duty to act on it. Because coaches, a lot of the times, and I see this in business as well, like the bosses, like, we want people to execute the plan how we laid it out. We created a plan likely because we wanted this particular result, or we wanted to avoid this particular problem. And so when people deviate from that plan and do their own thing, oftentimes they end up getting the result that you didn't want, or the result, or the thing that you wanted to avoid, they do. And so for me, I needed to understand what my coaches wanted at the end of the day. So if you wanted me to take over this part of the field and nothing can happen in this part of the field, it's okay. I might do it different than you tell me, but at least I know what you're trying to get accomplished, and that's my goal as well. And then I can use my judgment, because what coaches would always do and what bosses also hate is when you do exactly what they say to a T and you like don't have any kind of proactivity or any kind of discernment of your own, right? It's like, well, if that was the case, I would have just got a robot to do it. And most coaches say they don't want robots when they really do. But so there's this fine line, right, where you have to prepare yourself in a way in which you can trust your gut feeling. You're not just out there just doing stuff just because. So now I've seen this play 1,000 times. I've looked it over. I've seen all of the risk, and I'm making an educated decision to veto what my coach told me. And guess what happens when it works? They won't say anything about it. They'll take the credit for it, actually, like, right? It makes them look better. But I did have to learn to toe that line, because I can also remember when I first got to Philly, realizing that a lot of the young players were paying attention to my interactions with the coach. So if I didn't respect the coach's, even if I disagreed, if I didn't respect the coach's voice or his authority, then the young players, I would see them start to like be testy with the coach as well. And so it's a responsibility for me to even navigate the space in a way knowing that other guys are watching. And so there's so much as a leader that is less about you and you understanding the concept, and more about what does the team need. You know, how do I respect the coach's authority, but also make sure that we're all putting ourselves in the best position to have success. And that takes humility from everybody. It takes humility from me as a player. It takes humility from my authority figures, for us to say, hey, we know your title is player, your title is coach, your title is coordinator, yours is GM. But realistically, we're all here with the same goal, to win. And so whatever, take the badges off, we're all equal at that point. And I think the teams I've been on where we've been able to get to that dynamic from player to coach to coordinator, we've had the most success. So, but it takes time to build. I got to Philly and it took maybe 3 years until we really got to that point. And, you know, you had to get rid of a couple coaches and add a few players, but it took, you know, it took some time. And I think it's the same thing in business. It's about building relationships that, you know, are more dynamic than just you do what I say. You want people that add value. And as a leader, you have to be able to trust people to do what you brought them in the room to do. And as those individuals who are talented, who are coming in to do a job, it is also being cognizant of like, how am I the best teammate and best team member? This may not even be the best role for me, but how do I play this role to my best position until I get to, you know, where I'm trying to go? All of those things are important in team sports, but are also very important in business.
So kind of taking that and, you know, learning how to be led, you know, as a player, kind of in juxtaposition to where you're at now as a business leader who has a team who he leads, not just on the foundation front, but your other businesses as well. So how do you take the lessons of being in the seat and learning how to be led and apply that to the way that you lead your businesses today?
So I think the one thing that's different about maybe how my journey in sports is different in business is, in sport you get to come in as a rookie and there are always people in front of you who've got more experience. Whether it's, you know, it could be high school sports, you're a freshman, you got the seniors and juniors to learn from. You come in, you got the veterans that you can learn from. In business, you know, I jumped in and I'm the boss. Like, people are looking at me. It's not, nobody's there to kind of give you the direction. And so I've had to really lean on, you know, finding mentors and other folks to just piggyback off of and learn from, which again is what you do when you're a rookie, right? And I've had to really put myself back in that seat. Okay, as a rookie, what did I do when I was in a place where I didn't have all of the answers? I didn't, you know everything, but I knew I had talent and I knew I was a leader. But in order to lead somebody, I gotta know what I'm doing. And so I think that it just requires you as a leader to constantly not only be thinking about who you're serving and how you're serving, but how you're developing yourself, right? Because if you're in front, then the team is only going to go as far as you go. So there's a responsibility to move forward and move backwards, or look backwards while you're moving forward. And I saw great examples of that in Drew Brees. I saw the John Bilmers of the world. You know, as a young player with the Saints in that locker room, we had so many veterans that knew how to, one, develop themselves into Pro Bowl caliber players, but also knew that on a team it made no sense or did us no justice for just them to have success. They needed to permeate that success and that mindset to permeate the entire organization. And yeah, when you see that every day, you get used to it. Now I'm in a place where, again, in business, you don't have that environment where every single person around you is dedicated to this one goal of excellence, and everybody's literally sacrificing their lives to get it. Now you're in a place where you've got to be able to stand on your own 10 toes and really put in the work and go seek and find those teammates, seek and find those people who are just as passionate as you are.
No, that humility, and you said something really important, not just the ability to step forward, but sometimes the ability to step back. I think that becomes, a really crucial piece of the leadership journey. And you kind of touched on it in another part of your book, when you talked about leaving New Orleans and arriving in Philly. You came to Philly with something to prove to yourself. And at the time, you were already an established veteran. Again, you'd done a lot. You'd had a lot of success in the league, but you talked about it in a way that I think leaders should really aspire to be, and it's a leader who is still ascending. Like you've established this place, but your internal standard wants you to keep going further and further. So can you talk about your ability to kind of balance leading through your experience with the Eagles, but also embracing the change that came with Chip Kelly, and the way that he moved in a new city and all the new things that you had to embrace in Philly, but still kind of holding that internal standard high?
Yeah, I think one of the things I learned in 2012, the Saints got hit with the infamous Bounty Gate scandal, right? And our head coach, assistant head coach, a bunch of people got suspended, and it was probably the worst, not probably, it was the worst year of my entire career. 2012, we were the worst defense in NFL history. We gave up the most yards of any defense in the history of the National Football League. My name is on that as well. That's another fun fact. And so just working through that year was like so frustrating, and watching even some of the veterans that I knew, like the guys that I respected, the John Vilmas of the world, the Roman Harpers, these guys who literally I was copying, their approach. I saw them in this tough situation really folded in, and it was a miserable year. And so when I got to Philly, I saw how frustrated some of the team was with Chip Kelly's style of coaching, and you realize that the team is very close to buckling, and all it takes is one or two of those veterans like myself to fold it in, and the whole house collapses. And so I had to, in that same moment, think about, okay, I know what it looks like when this house collapses, and I don't want to be a part of that. That's not fun for anybody. So then what can I do in this when I don't have control over the head coach, I don't have control over the culture, but I do control myself. And so I made it a daily objective of mine to lean on my own personal standard. So my standard was higher than the team's. And at the end of the day, when you continue to hold yourself and you hold yourself to your high standard, it only exposes everybody else. Right? It was hard to stand next to me and slack or not watch film or not be prepared. Even if you're a coach, I came into the meetings more prepared than half of the coaches. And what happened is when you just start to do that, I'm not doing it to make fun of anybody, to point anybody out. I'm just living my standard. And naturally, those who want to be the player that I was being gravitated to me. Those who didn't enjoy, the hard grind of being successful stepped away. But what that did was immediately identified who our core team was and who we needed to replace. And I think that's the role of a leader, is when things hit the fan, you hold the standard. And then everybody who wants to come with a standard will gravitate to you, and everybody else will identify themselves. And I think that was the first thing for me when I got here was finding those core players, the Darren Sproles of the world, Chris Maragos, who was another one, Zach Ertz, Brandon Graham. These guys every single day were willing to put in and willing to sacrifice. And so I needed to lift them up. I needed to put air under their wings. And the people who weren't, next to the standard, I would just stand next to them and do what I do. So they stand out even more, right? Sometimes you have to do that, and you got to purge your locker room of those who aren't going in the direction you want to go. And that might take 2 years, 3 years. And I was 2014. We won a championship in 2017. 3 years later, we were able to turn that whole locker room around with those same core players. So, I learned a lot of that through watching older veterans before me.
I can vouch for that 2012 year. That was brutal. And the interesting thing was that the front office in New Orleans, they saw themselves purging our roster. But when you lose a Malcolm and you lose a Darren Sproles, it doesn't get better. But shifting gears a little bit, one of the major themes throughout your book is the concept of overcoming adversity. And you talk about the moments that you set a goal specifically in your career, whether it was, to win the Thorpe Award in 2008 or to make a Pro Bowl in 2015. And you kind of dig into how you went about achieving it, the mindset that you had. One interesting thing that you said that I think we've all witnessed at some point, the path is never easy, but sometimes the perception is that you have an easy path. And, for you came in as a first-round pick, but I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and just being a veteran, like, that journey is not easy for anybody. I don't care who you are. So kind of talk me through how you were able to stay focused on the task at hand and stay focused on the goals and the vision, even in the face of, the misconceptions and ups and downs.
Yeah, I think staying motivated is a tough thing, and it changes over time. So when I first came into the league, I'm young. Everybody wants to establish themselves. Everybody says probably the same exact thing. I want to be a Hall of Famer, right? And it's like, okay, but really, you don't really know what that means on a day-to-day basis. It's like, where I want this to end because that's just the highest thing that I know, but I don't really know how to get there. And I was very, very frustrated as a young player because immediately if I say I want the highest peak and then within the first few steps you trip, you automatically started thinking, all right, well, there's no way I'm going to make it up there. So by the time I got out of New Orleans in my first 5 years, I had given up on ideas of being in the Hall of Fame. I was like, because that's like me starting the season and only thinking about the Super Bowl the whole season. Right? It's like, of course, everybody wants to win a Super Bowl. Everybody says the same exact thing. But, the Jacksonville Jaguars are not ready to win a Super Bowl right now. Right? And everybody knows that. But so it's like that goal is really nothing. What I started to change and I started to really come into my own is when I really changed my goals less to like stats and these other things to more how do I want to occupy space. When I got to Philadelphia, I walked down the hallways and realized that all the hallways were covered with every Pro Bowl player that's ever played for the franchise. And at the end of the hall, there's like a couple empty spaces. So in my mind, I'm like, I had never made a Pro Bowl. I want to be on this wall. When I walk down this hall, I need to be on this wall. So every day, you see, it's a space. So I knock on that space every time I pass it. So literally every single day, I'm focused on just that standard and that standard alone. Eventually, I get on the wall. So now I need a new goal. I start looking at the stadium, and I'm like, well, it would be really nice to be on one of these banners. They hang these banners really high. It looks like they don't take them down at all. These might be up here forever. One side is for team accomplishments, Super Bowl championships, which there were none. So there were NFC championships. And then on the other are kind of their ring of honor, the players that, the special group of players that they want to remember forever that have an impact on the fan base in this stadium. So that became my goal. I want to occupy those two spaces. I got one of them on the team side. We'll see on the other side. But but that became kind of those goals, and those are things you can see every single day. When I go in the weight room, you can see the link over the practice stadium. When I'm on practice, I'm looking and preparing for what I want to do. So now every day, you're taking intentional steps toward your goal. It's not just something you say and you're giving lip service to that's way down the road. It's like, no, I'm going to win a Super Bowl today because I did this work, and I know when I get into that stadium, I'm going to do well because I'm already envisioning it. I'm going to get on these walls. I tap on it every single day. I'm making sure I'm holding myself to that standard. We have to create those things sometimes for ourselves, those cues, whether it's writing on your mirror every day what you want to be, where you're going to go. You have to kind of see it over and over and over and over and over again, until you look up one day, and I was on that wall a few times. And it's like, okay, I did that. But it's really not about, I can't tell you one thing I did. I can't tell you it was this one game. I had 3 interceptions, and that was what got me to Pro Bowl. No, it's daily gains over a long period of time. And just like investing or any business, you start to see those compounding interests over time when you look back at your whole career and say, wow, I did a whole lot. Felt like just small steps here or there, but when you turn it all in, cash it all in, there's a lot of chips on the table.
And again, just being able to watch that journey and just see it compound over, year over year, it was incredible to watch. And like you can kind of see the intentionality in which you move. And kind of wrapped within that, when you signed with the Eagles, I think it was in 2014, you talked about knowing that this was potentially your last opportunity to sign a contract if you didn't perform at your level. You said you kind of wanted to go out as playing as the best version of you, but at the time you were constantly kind of comparing yourself to other players, and it's just something that you do, yeah. Right? It's how we get evaluated. It's how you kind of see what the people in your position are doing and see how you're doing. But it got to a point where you realized that internally you had to stop comparing yourself to other players and really, again, kind of lean on that internal standard. For you, like, what made you come to that conclusion, and like how did moving away from those comparisons free you up mentally?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I was doing was I was just robbing myself of the joy of what I was doing. Because I'm always looking at other players. Like when I first got drafted, the first year, I'm looking at every other rookie DB. Rest in peace, Ravonte Davis was drafted out of Illinois, another corner behind me. He was starting for the Colts. For the Dolphins. There was another rookie DB was starting for the Colts. And here I am, the first DB taken overall, and I'm playing special teams. So automatically, I'm starting my career with the idea that bust is right down the road. And so when realistically, like, none of these things are real. I'm creating the majority of the narrative in my head because I'm looking at other people and assuming something about myself as opposed to looking at myself and evaluating, playing the cards in the hands that I had. Or you'll look at your favorite player, and it's good, right? You look at maybe like another business or somebody you admire and you watch what they do, you're studying, and it's cool, but it's a fine line when you start to make judgments about yourself and where you are based on where they are. You don't necessarily know their experience. You don't know if they got, they're in the right system, if the coach, just putting them in a starting role because they invested money into them. You don't know how this has really come to fruition. And so I had to really, and then I got cut. So now I'm sitting and I'm like, wow, for maybe a few days, I was jobless and I had an opportunity to think, like, I'm really unemployed right now. If I get another job, if I get another team, how do I want to, and this is, the last contract, how do I want that to play out? And I was like, well, I want it to be something where I'm authentically myself. If I'm not going to make it in this league, I'm going to not make it being 100% me, and not worry about anybody else. And that required me to know myself, for one. So I had to really take time to ask myself, what are the things that I do 100% best, and how do I put myself in position to do that over and over again? What are my biggest weaknesses? And not only just so that I can work on them, but like, how do I protect myself from them? I have to spend energy and plan and scheme to protect myself from my weaknesses. And then how do I create a plan to continuously just get better? Like not at just my weaknesses, but also add new strengths. And that process really helped me change it around and really stop focusing on other people and focus on myself. And when I did that, I started realizing like I got a lot of tools. Like if I use it, I got long arms. I can crowd the line of scrimmage. I'm really, really smart. I can play multiple positions. I'm fast. So even if I'm in here with these big guys, I can get lower on the ground than them. I started figuring out how my avatar, what I was blessed with, can be used to my advantage if I use it this particular way. And so my game became less even about my opponent and more about me. If I knew what I could do and what I couldn't, then I knew what I should attempt to do from a strategy standpoint against in any particular situation. And I realized how many of us don't know ourselves or don't know like what we do. We don't self scout enough. And I talk about that in the book. A conversation I had with Drew Brees one practice. I'm just like, hey Drew, you want to. He's probably a top 2 quarterback in the league at the time. Like, what do you see when we're playing in practice? What do you see? What's your evaluation of me? And he told me some stuff that was humbling. He was like, hey, you're really smart. You do a good job of disguising coverages. You're tough, you're a tackler, you're physical. He's like, but you don't have really good ball skills. So if I see you, if it's you and Marcus Colston, one-on-one in the back, I'm just going to throw it up. He's like, no offense, because I don't think you're going to catch it. So I'm not worried about you getting an interception. At the worst, it's an incomplete pass. You break it up. At the best, Marcus catches it or it's pass interference. And so knowing that, for one, it was like my feelings were hurt a little bit. I was like, I can catch the ball. But I'm like, but to know that if he's thinking that, then that's probably what the majority of quarterbacks are thinking. It's probably what the majority of the good coordinators are thinking. So I knew now that if there was a situation where I was one-on-one, I was expecting the ball to come. And so now I'm able to protect myself from the things that are my weaknesses. But in my strengths, I knew that anything else, then it was my world. So if you're going to try to beat me at my strength, like I'm with it. Let's do that. And I can protect myself from where you're trying to get to. That nugget, like, bought me probably another 5 years in the league. Just being able to know that one thing about myself that I probably wouldn't have admitted before or didn't take enough time to understand. And I think when people understand their business, they understand where their weaknesses are, and then you understand where all the danger comes from, and you can protect yourself away from that. A lot of people are so busy trying to make gains or follow other people, compare themselves to other people, that they don't really want to understand that that's not their journey. They go in the wrong direction, or they don't protect themselves from their own weaknesses, or they're not honest with themselves about their weaknesses, and that's an important part of moving forward.
Dude, I just understanding what self-scouting is and the way that you leverage it, man, there's so many cheat codes in there that I do think apply to everyone in this room from a business perspective. There's a couple different ways to make progress. You can move forward, or you can kind of get rid of the slack and the friction that you're carrying. And I think to your point, self-scouting is the perfect tool to kind of strategically position yourself to do just that. And I know we're running low on time, but I definitely want to finish on this question. We kind of talked about it a little bit before. As professional athletes, as former professional athletes now, there's 3 different personas that we have to learn how to manage. There's the person, it's who am I as an individual? There's the professional, like how do I show up to work, whether it's on the field or whether it's in the boardroom. And then there's this third, the persona, the athlete persona. And this is kind of how people expect you to show up. And most often we run into people that want the version that they want, not the version that you're ready and willing to present. I think your book did a really masterful job of, kind of pointing out these different personas and like the layers and the complexity in which you had to think about them. Yeah. So like in your current world, like how do you navigate these 3 different personas, in everything that you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. As an athlete, well, for one, underneath all of our clothes and our jobs and our titles, we are just whoever we are, at our core, our identity. right? But the majority of the time we get identified by what we do. And so for me, that's been football. And in team sports and football specifically, like you're supposed to act a certain way, right? Like even regardless of who you actually are, you're supposed to be a role model. You represent the shield, the team, all of these things that you're supposed to do. And so there's expectations as to who you're supposed to be in the media, who you're supposed to be in the public. And then there's the idea of the business you and what that's supposed to represent and who you're supposed to look like and talk like, who you're supposed to be around. And for a long time, probably my entire career, I siloed those versions of myself and jumped in and out of them probably seamlessly. Depending on which room I was in, I can be the athlete, I can be the business person, I can be myself around friends. All three of those people are totally different. And I think for a long time that's worked. Now being out of football, where like part of that identity is kind of stripped from you, I might look athletic, but I'm no longer an athlete, right? I don't play professional sports. So I don't have to show up as the athlete. But I think where I am now, and I think where the value is, again, is how I started, is authenticity is really what I'm finding to be the most valuable thing out there. Because the fear of, as an athlete before, is if you step outside of this box, then you'll lose sponsorships, you'll lose teams or whatever. People won't support you the way you do. Same thing in business. If you don't conduct yourself in this type of way, you don't look this way, talk this way, then maybe I don't get all the business that I want. But what I've found is that when you step into a space authentically yourself and you've done the work, you know who you are, then it's the same thing like I talked about earlier when you set the standard. Those who see you and align with you, have shared values and want to go where you're going will naturally gravitate to you. Everybody else will just kind of get out of the way. And I think that is, to me, that helps at this point in time in my career because I don't want to waste time. So what I feel like when you're not authentic, right, you have people who misidentify you because you dress this way, you talk this way. That's really not you. They assume that you may be into what they're doing. You spend a whole year feeding into a relationship just to find out that in the end, you two actually don't see things the same way. And it's only because you weren't being authentic up front. And so for me, I think it's a tool right now that I'm using not only for myself, but as a cheat code to quickly get to where I'm trying to go is to immediately, hey, this is me, this is what I'm doing. Anybody else who's with me, like raise your hand. Let's go talk. If you're not, it's fine. It's nothing personal. And I think, authenticity leads to great relationships. It leads to mutuality. It leads to cooperation. And right now, and in business and in life, I think that those are really vital resources to have. And so, yeah, I think my struggle now is like knocking down the silos of those three people and really merging those identities so that my business reflects who I am as a person. My foundation reflects the journeys that I'm going on in life, the resources that I've come into, and now I'm trying to give to the community. My businesses reflect my interests. Damari's, I love fashion, so I like looking good. So Damari is part of what we do. Serving communities is important to me. So quick service restaurants and franchises in communities that I'm from is part of my ethos. So now it's about taking all three of those versions of me and merging them into kind of this beautiful weave, which takes intentionality, but you find along the way that the people who come along to help are stronger and believe in what you're trying to do.
100%, man. And I, you said it perfectly. I mean, I think one, like the authenticity that you move with is tangible. And, I think in doing that way and moving the way that you move, you're going to find those people that are going to be able to come in and deposit into your life as opposed to continually withdraw from it. So, I mean, I think with that said, well, one, thank you for this opportunity because it's been a learning experience for me too. We haven't really spoken like this in a while.
Don't let him do this. Don't let him. What he won't tell y'all is when this transition out of sports is something that, like, even myself with all of the things that I have going on is a very difficult thing to do. You do something from the age of 7 years old, 8 years old, all the way until I'm 36 now, and you strip that away from you. and then try to go out into the world and do some other things, it's like the Twilight Zone. It really is. And there are not many people who share the experience and understand even where you're coming from. But this gentleman was somebody I've leaned on a lot in the last 2 years, being able to just like navigate, what does it look like to step into. I've been a captain on almost every team I've been on, but all of a sudden being the CEO or the president, being in charge of my own businesses was nerve wracking, right? Spending time with him, just understanding like having people to ease you through those transitions, having people to kind of guide you, give you not even just the business things, but how to deal with these things on a personal level, I think is important. So you've been a great resource for that. And I think a lot of that is when you see my success and my story, you'll see even in the book there's always these other characters that are there helping me lift. It's not a story about just me and my sheer will. It's about somebody who is lifted up by a community, who's built by a community, who is also trying to then build that community with them. So yeah, just making sure that when you see that, recognizing that there are a lot of players and people that contribute to this, and I would love to, continue to add people. If you see what we're doing from a foundation standpoint, business standpoint, and you would love to support, learn more, get involved, please reach out. I truly believe that to do anything great in this world, it takes, something outside of yourself, bigger than you, and that takes community. So just trying to expand that community as much as possible and see how far we can take it. Appreciate y'all for having me.
So I think at this point we got about 15 minutes. We can open it up, and if anyone has any questions, I think there's a microphone floating around the room.
I want to thank both of you. This was just a really wonderful conversation, and that self-scouting is a gem, and I will be using that practice myself. But one of the things that I wanted to ask is I am now the parent of 2 young adult children. My husband and I are empty nesters. My kids are doing great. But when I see you guys sitting up here, I really also want to stress that this didn't happen when you guys stepped onto the playing field. If you can give some insights about how your family, I met your mother today, you talked about how your mother leads your foundation. I know that when people say, listen, Lisa, your kids are doing great, we always say it's the village. It's not. Speak to how those experiences, those life experiences helped you into developing into this holistically just very talented and successful person, because as you said, it's just not one thing. I'm smart. You named so many things.
Yeah.
If you could expound upon that, that would really be helpful.
Yeah, I think planting seeds. I think if there's one thing that parents, have the opportunity to do is just plant seeds. I'm at the age now where all of the things that like I heard my parents repeat over and over and over again when I was a kid, I'm starting to see it in real life. Like, that's what they were talking about. Okay. I was too young to get it before, but now all these things that they repeated over and over again, I used to close my eyes with. Like, I'm leaning on that. Like, my dad's favorite thing to say was, "You don't know what you don't know." And as a kid, I'm like, what? I don't know what that means. But like now, I see it. It's like, oh, be curious in everything. Like, you don't know what you don't know, so always ask questions. Always ask why. And that's been at the core of me, right? And so I think, for me, I've been trying to at least just showcase, like, be the bloom of those seeds that they planted. So my mom, I talked to you about just the idea of like, do you want to be a well or you want to be a puddle, and having to really sit with that idea, like, well, what do I want to do and what's possible? That seed is planted by her, and then to even just see it in real life. Not only she was the president of the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation, but she went on to be the president of PIFMA, which is the professional, it's the Union of Professional Athlete Moms. So she was the head football mom as well, right? So it's like, it's not only that she's just running my foundation. This is who she is as a person, as a leader. So there's no surprise that those things are what you see in me. My dad, I talk about it all the time. One of the lessons that he gave me, he used to make us clean up, in front of our house or whatever, clean up any trash. And we'd come in thinking we're going to go back to playing video games, and he'd take the controller and say, "You're not done." I'm like, "What do you mean? There's no trash in front of the house." he would make us go 2 houses that way and 2 houses that way, with the idea that like this is our community, you own your community, and wherever you call home is your home, so you take the responsibility. So it's no wonder why I'm doing all the things that I do in the community, particularly in the places that I call home. All of the places that we do work with the foundation is everywhere that I've called home: Louisiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. And so I do think, what those seeds that we plant in our children, the things we tell them about themselves, the things that we tell them are possible, are what they'll grow into later, what they'll, have the opportunity to bloom later. But I think it's important, especially in communities of color and children who are less fortunate, to make sure that we are continually planting those seeds, because there are plenty of other examples that are telling them, or messaging out there that are telling them the exact opposite, that they don't have the potential, that they don't have what it takes, that they, that's too far-fetched. And our children believe it the same way that I believed my parents when they told me the opposite.
Hello, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Today was great. I really appreciated the parallels of being a football player and the ups and downs and all of the lessons that you learned, and then being a new business owner. There's so many nuggets today, and I just want to thank you for that. You had talked about when you moved from being a football player to a business owner that you relied heavily on mentors. And I was curious, could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how did you find a mentor, or, if you could share anything more with that?
Yeah, one of them sitting next to me. Like, one of the things that we worked on was just, how to, again, when you talk about messaging, my whole life was just like, all right, you're a jock, like you're an athlete. And now I'm trying to step into a place where I want to see myself as a leader, and most of the doubt was coming from within, right? And so just having him talk about, or really lay out like the parallels between, like, you've been a captain and you've done these things, it's the same in business. Actually, you are probably more prepared and qualified than the majority of the people who are in these leadership positions, because none of them have been trained since they were 7 years old on how to deal with other teammates, how to deal with conflict, how to come together with people from different backgrounds, how to perform, evaluate, correct, and perform again over and over and over again, how to work hard in one direction for years at a time. Like, these are lessons that I've been learning since I was 7, but it took me to have a third party really see and evaluate what I have going on, and then redirect my imagination and how I saw it, my perspective. And so I think that's the cool thing about mentors most of the time, is sometimes they'll give you knowledge that you don't know, and it's a great kind of nugget, but sometimes they'll tell you something about yourself that you just didn't see. And most oftentimes that's the most empowering thing, because you realize I've had what I needed the entire time. I just needed somebody to show me how to use it. And so when it came to looking up different, and I'm a shy person, I'm very introverted, so networking is an exercise for me. So finding mentors is I have to be even more particular. But I've looked for people who, not necessarily the most successful people, but I look for people who think themselves successful when they help other people. And I think those are people I enjoy working with, who they get what they need. They're not here to take. They want to help you because that's genuinely who they are. They genuinely see the potential in you, and they want to see you, not in no competition, but they just want to see you do well. Those are people that you build reciprocity with, right? Because they'll continue to feed you, you'll feed them, and then they'll show you how to be that resource for others. That idea, those things kind of grow. I think sometimes people look for the most successful folks and get frustrated when they can't get answers or can't get calls back, or or the relationship is just not there. It's like, go where people will feed you. And I think that's been at least a good thing for me in the last few years of transition.
We're going to pass the mic that way. I just had a quick question. It's a statement and a question.
you two are, thank you for today, and you two are two incredible men. And you see it, you feel it, just because of who you are, both of you. I know Marcus, I know who he is as a man, as a father, as a friend, and I see those qualities also in you.
Thank you.
What would you tell both of you, and and also in directing this to you as well, Malcolm, what would you tell these new players who are stepping on the field about not only being men, but good men and great athletes? Because you two have accomplished that in such a meaningful and exceptional way.
I'll let you go first. Yeah, no way.
I mean, I think, and it's funny because it ties into both of the questions that came before you. I think, one, this thing is going to be over a whole lot sooner than you think it is. And I think we can both look back on our careers and say, we probably played way longer than we maybe should have, but not long enough to be prepared to leave. So I think, one, just being prepared that it's going to be a lot shorter ride than you think. And what you do with that ride and that platform. Everyone likes to talk about the fact that you had this platform as if it was given to you. Like, no, you created this platform. And how can you use that platform to, plant seeds that are going to bear trees that you might not be able to sit under? Just kind of thinking long term in that way to where, look, there was nobody in my community that had an opportunity to do what I was able to do. And just the influence that you have going back and being able to reach people is unparalleled. So what I would tell those guys is to, even at 22 and 23, like, keep planting seeds that are going to bear trees that you might never have an opportunity to sit under. That would be my advice.
I think, and this is, honestly, if I was in an NFL locker room right now, coaches probably wouldn't want me to say something like this, but what I would tell players, especially this day and age, with the amount of leverage that they have and the opportunity they have as athletes, that's different than even when we came into the league, is really don't sell your life to the game. Like, I think a lot of the times, we came from this ideology, like, to be the best football player I could be, this has to be my whole life. But like I said, the average career is 3 years. So you've done all of this, and then at the age of 24, 25, the league is done with you. And there's no like, hey, here's a severance package or anything. Like, you don't even have benefits after 3 years. You're not even vested. So the league will use you up and then kick you out. And then once you're done playing, then there's no more use for you unless you were one of those special players that fans would love to pay tickets to come see. It's like, then most of the time you're forgotten. And it's like, so understand what you're getting into. You've got to convince yourself to be great at anything. You've got to dedicate a lot of things, but don't forget to develop the other parts of you. Don't forget to set yourself up for after ball. If we talked to anybody in this room and I told you were 3 years away from retirement, the way you spent your money and set up your financials would be totally different, right? That's the case with these athletes coming into the NFL. Immediately, your rookie year, you are 3 years away from retirement, the majority of you. So it's just understanding how to set yourself up then and understand that this football, you play it, you do whatever you can do for as long as you can, but this is just the first act, and the second act will actually be longer and hopefully more substantial if you set it up that way. And I think it's just changing the narrative that they are hearing right now, that the league is everything. Like, once I make it there, it's like, cool, it's over with. And it's like anything. It's like, you making money is different than keeping money. A lot of people make it, and a lot of people lose it. It's two different muscles. A lot of people can make it to the league, but every year they bring in a couple hundred rookies, which means there's only 2,000 spots. So that means that they're rotating. People are going out and in. And I think a lot of them don't understand that. A lot of them come in and think that they'll look at me and say, hey, I want to have a 13-year career like you. And I'm like, I was almost out after 5. Like, you know, get what you can, set yourself up, always have a plan. And if you play 13, great. But if you play 3, you should still be able to take this and leapfrog off of it.
No pressure. It's the last question.
I'll try to end well. You've touched on this throughout the conversation, and I'm actually running a podcast called the Patrimony Podcast. And the concept is becoming the man I have to be to raise the young man after me. And being as though I didn't necessarily have a father figure in my life, I'm actually having to be my own father figure and like sort of become the man that I want to be in the future. So the question that I wanted to ask you is, what would you say is a pivotal moment in your life that actually made you the man that you are today, or the men that you are today, whether small or large?
You good? You got something on top of it?
Yeah.
I got a couple moments.
I mean, I kind of share some of your situations. So my father passed when I was 14 years old. I was 2 weeks into my freshman year of high school. And what's interesting is, I always talk about this. This was 1997. So we're 27 some odd years. And I'm still unpacking the lessons that I learned from him at that time. You know, so it kind of goes back to what I said before. Like he planted seeds in me that like Malcolm said, I had no idea what I was learning at the time, and I'm still unpacking some of those seeds on how to, you know, love my wife and how to, you know, raise and love my kids, how to be in my community. So, I mean, ultimately there is no blueprint. I think you draw inspiration and resources from wherever you can get inspiration and resources from. But I think there's kind of this innate sense and this innate compass that you know what's right, you know what's good, you know what's not good, and you know ultimately following that compass is going to attract the right people, and it's going to put you in position to lead the folks that you ultimately want to lead. Because again, to Malcolm's point, it's going to be authentic to you, and it's going to be authentic to your situation.
Yeah, I think fatherhood is probably the number one thing that's like made me kind of who I am. There's a ton of other things, you know, like mentors, people I've seen that have had impact, but I think having 2 daughters and now trying to figure out how to be, you know, a nurturing father, be like the father that I want to be for them, you start to realize, like, I don't know that I have all of those tools. And so I've even been on the opposite side of it, where I've had a father my entire life, always been present. But I mean, if you look at my life, there's no way he could have prepared me for the experiences that I'm having. He never went to the NFL, never did all these things that I'm doing, never had the money that I'm having, I've run out of advice that I can get from him like a long time ago. And so oftentimes I've almost felt a little bit of resentment there because I feel like I'm navigating, you know, myself. And I realize now that I'm a father and I'm thinking about, you know, my kids, I don't necessarily know all the experiences my daughters will go through, right? It's just my job to give them as much as I know and do the best I can. And that's one of the things that I've realized that my dad did, gave me as much as he possibly could. And then it's up for me to continue that journey myself. I can't stop where he is, right? Because that's how those generational curses and generational traumas and ignorance, whatever, kind of continue. It's up to me to step off of that. And in that journey, that takes you multiple places. That's finding community of other men who are on the same, you know, wavelength. I think the idea, or even conversations about manhood in general, need to change. Right, because there are not many places you can go where you're going to get a nuanced version of what it means to be a man, especially if you're talking about feelings and how to love and how to care and nurture a community. That language is usually never even used around men or when they're applying to men. And so that's been a very intentional journey for me. One that I think requires a little bit of isolation. It requires, you to do that self-scout and really figure out where are the areas I want to improve, and then boldly step into finding those resources over time. But, you know, I think it's our responsibility to not be perfect as fathers. I think it's our responsibility to do the best we can and to continue to try to improve. And as long as we're continuing to do that, then we're doing our best effort to give our children the best opportunities possible, and that's really all we can ask for.